Welcome to the Flat Track Factory. Today's part 3 of my wide-ranging podcast-style interview with friend and engineer and flat track racer Craig Pavlich. If you enjoyed the previous 2 episodes, I think you'll dig this. If you didn't, it's probably just more of the same. If you haven't seen any of them, I would suggest checking out episode 2 first.
From whatever different background, we all seem to enjoy that is the camaraderie at the track, the prep, the butterflies, the anticipation, the competition. This is what I think racing is all about. And I made huge mistakes in my late teens and early 20s in my first pro career of not realizing how amazing that part of it was. And
Yeah.
I think that now at this point in my life, going back to it, I think I'm a better racer in many ways because I can appreciate it and these relationships that we have.
I mean, it's often a joke, but it's not a joke. I say that I ride motorcycles to make friends because the beauty of it is in most places that I am in life, I'm just waiting to talk about motorcycles. And when I'm at a race, I get to talk about motorcycles with people who also love motorcycles, and all my best friends are also into motorcycles or something like that. And so, that's one of the big things is the camaraderie and, flat track, when we get back to that as a specific sport, they call it the flat track family, and it really is. You've already had on your channels a lot of people who I think are famous, who are pretty important people. And I've even met some of them in person at random places. It's a very down-to-earth crowd, and it's all one thing. If anybody needs a part, if anybody needs help, if anybody gets injured, we're all in it as a team. So it's pretty cool. You have to get way, way, way out on the pointy end of this sport before it's not a team. And I'm not even sure at the national level that it isn't a flat track family. I think it still pretty much is. So this is kind of a unique sport in that the amount of ego that's built into it typically is a lot lower. And a lot of people are out there just to have fun. And I think that ethos has become more popular recently.
Yes, there's something in incredibly American about flat track racing, in that it's probably the oldest motorcycle racing sport, is born here on American track, with American riders. And I would say what Nicky Hayden, maybe took flat track to, or he didn't take flat track to Europe, but he took the gravitas of flat track to Europe, won the world championship in the early aughts or whatever that was, and made it visible. And Europeans now do it. Rossi's got a gigantic series of interviews out about him, talking about it on these high visibility interview channels. So that uniquely American sport is kind of become worldwide.
Yeah, well, I'd add to that because one of the things that I love about flat track over the other sports that I've tried, and I still go motocross riding, I still go out to the road race track, is it's really about the rider. It's much more about the rider than it is about the tech. So in my day job, I'm an engineer. I've worked on hybrid electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, racing vehicles of all kinds. I typically end up doing that by hooking up my laptop, all kinds of stuff, data acquisition, all of these things. I don't bring any of that stuff to the racetrack when I go out on my vintage motorcycle. It's just me and a couple of screwdrivers and the bike. I don't bring any data. I have no digital control over anything if I can help it. And it's really about that raw experience of the ride. And the real beauty of it is the accessibility, because there's only so much that tuning your motorcycle can bring you. So in a lot of areas of motorsport, you can be bought out of competitiveness with equipment or effort or a team. But in flat track, it's a lot harder. Let's not say it's not possible. Obviously it is, but it's certainly the equation of rider to bike is more balanced in favor of the rider. And that makes it more of a athletic activity. And I think to most people that makes it a little bit more fun because you can just kind of go out there and tool around and there's not so much involved with it. So, that's the thing that I love about it too.
I spent a lifetime coordinating this motion in a few degrees, in a few feet with my body back and forth, and I've never done it right yet. And I just keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, someday they might invent a robot that can do it, but we've got a while to go before they're able to manage changing dirt conditions. So, I think that your career is not in danger for at least the future of how long you're able to do it.
I got a few good years left.
So we should be good. Exactly.
Let's switch gears.
I think
just
you're
for a
safe.
Second. For those that are maybe newer to flat track, we have rear wheels called knockoff wheels or knockoff hubs, where the disc carrier and the sprocket are mounted up with one gigantic nut. And I've only ever had one fall off one time. Craig, would you like to tell the story about that?
I would not. I would not like to tell that story. Pretty sure I want to say that was my first time dealing with the knockoff nut. So first of all, you get what you pay for, Mike, and you've never paid me the mechanic for you. I have always volunteered my time freely, driven from wherever the heck I live to come down and mechanic. So I'm sorry.
I can see I've opened a fresh wound, even though it's been years.
So the one time, the first time, he's like, yeah, just hit it with the hammer. I'm like, tink, tink, tink. I don't want to bend his fancy, shiny bike. And next thing he comes rolling off the track, and the nut had spun its way off of the sprocket, and the sprocket just fell over to the side of the axle. So no harm done because the chain was still on.
On a 750 twin.
On a mile.
National, on a mile.
Let's just be okay. Well, wait a minute. First of all, that story follows the story. Let's back up on my mechanicking credibility here. So,
okay.
So Mike is building a 750. He's talking about it for weeks. Now, the reason that he's called it's called the Flat Track Factory is because we used to call Mike Factory because everything that he owns has to be perfect, like he's a factory certified, factory supported rider. Like
which
it
is
must
clearly
look
an insult.
like.
I mean, it's not a brag. Let's be honest.
You do a great job, considering that you're a one-man show these days. You do a great job. I'm not trying to knock that down. I'm just saying there's a level of commitment and perfection that Mike demands. So he is pretty much spending a pretty good amount of money on this 750 because at the time, what was the rules was that there was a lower class, there was a lower tier. There was GNC 2 of flat track instead, and you could ride a twin as a non-premier class rider.
Oh my God! This is going to trigger me.
Anyway, don't get triggered. That's aside the point. There was a tier where we had a chance. That was the point. There was a tier where Mike, coming back from retirement to ride a twin, had a chance. And so he tells me he's going to build a 750. Would I drive out to the track? In this case, it was Springfield, I want to say, or maybe it was Indy, and mechanic for him. I show up in the morning, ready to help him, I don't know, change tires, work on the bike, clean his helmet because he's that particular. And as I walked into the pit, there's a bike with the tank off and an explosion of wires laid out all over the bike, parts scattered all around.
You're mixing stories. Let's go back.
No. Let me finich this story. Let me finish this story because there's wires everywhere, parts everywhere, friends standing around scratching their head, like not sure what to do. Anyway, this entire race turns into a race to try to finish a motorcycle that is not finished before qualifying happens. And we were out there. I didn't even have time to take a leak. We were out there snapping wires together. Shane Fox and I were out there snapping wires together, figuring it out. I run over, get the laptop. I'm like wailing on the keys. I get a map from some guy. I have no idea if this will even run on the bike. We load it in, and I swear that thing fired up right before the time to go out for qualifying expired. And all of the people had been walking around all day, watching us shaking their heads as they walk by this disaster of a motorcycle.
Laughing.
Pretty much like, who comes to the race with an unfinished motorcycle? I mean, this bike was so unfinished, the frame wasn't even painted. It was raw steel. And they all cheered when the bike fired up.
That was awesome.
And you rolled out and you didn't qualify, but that's fair considering the condition of the bike.
No practice.
But it was still a victory because we actually got out there on the road. So, so that was the first outing of this bike. So then the second outing, because we now had it working, you had gotten it tuned. I think Shane had helped you, and you came back, and it was just supposed to be a mechanic outing. And yeah, okay, my mechanic skills failed you that time. but you know, let's just admit that it started out with a pretty stellar experience of me building a bike in the pits in 4 hours before the race. So it was pretty amazing.
I'll bet your knockoff nut will never
and then that is true. I have not had that problem. So now I have a bike with knockoffs, and we haven't lost one yet. So and then there's the other stellar mechanicking story about the fire, but we can save that one for another time. So that was
we may cut that up a little bit. That's somewhat of an interesting story. Maybe not, but yeah, just go ahead and tell that story. No, let me start the story. Craig, you are an electrical engineer, like a double, wizard engineer. Are you not?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have 3 college degrees now: English literature, mechanical engineering, and electrical engineering. I specialize in mechatronic software. So that's the mechanical or the electronic control of mechanical systems. So sort of the kind of stuff that you would have in any automation or ECUs and bikes and things like that. And I worked for a while. Sure.
I just want to do a slight tangent here. Why do I have so many friends who are engineers who are attracted to this and me?
Well, okay, so I mean, the first aspect of that is pretty simple. Motorsports is man plus machine sport, right? And so we talk about this all the time, especially in relation to you, because you've clearly bent towards the athlete side of the equation, right? So man, and then there's the machine, which a lot of mechanics tend towards, or engineers tend towards, once we realize that we're not going to be the star athlete, right? And so motorsports naturally blends with people who are into machinery and that sort of thing. But that said, I still think it comes back to my earlier comment that it's a very mental game, even if you're the athlete, to figure out what you need to do. And, I'm not going to kiss your butt because you're already arrogant enough. But you're a pretty intelligent guy. You can use that on the channel. I will say that publicly. Mike's a pretty clever guy. So, he tends to keep clever friends.
Yeah. Okay. So
I mean, that's why.
That's the background. And then I use this incredible skill that I have that I don't even understand where it came from, is I talk those guys who are attracted to the sport and me, and I manipulate them to come into the track and help me out. So I did that to him at a national at Springfield, and we had a minor electrical problem. Go ahead.
Well, okay, so normally when I go to a race, it's totally boring for me because I want to be racing, right? Like, I don't really want to spectate. But Mike turns mechanicking into a race by always showing up with a bike that needs some sort of insane triage during the middle of the experience, or you did, at least with the 750. It was only, let us be clear, this does not apply to the Rotax, only this experience with the 750. And so I had a lot of fun actually mechanicking for you. So this story is pretty interesting. Mike, we had those 2 stories.
He was the only person smiling. That's the preamble to the story. He'll get there. He, just like he's smiling right now, he was the only person doing that. Go ahead.
So again, so the next season we come back, there's another mile in my locale. Mike calls me up again, says, I think we got this bike sorted out. I got a new engine. I got the power that I need. I'm going to come up to the track. We're going to qualify this year. We're going to be in the main. I was like, okay, Mike, I'm ready to go. Right. So we get down to the track, and I want to say it was the first or second practice, and the bike comes in billowing smoke, just a train of smoke coming out of it. And I think to myself, oh man, his brand new engine just exploded on the track, right? Well, as he rolls over to the pit and does not come into the pit because this thing looks like it's a fire, it turns out that it's the lithium ion battery that he has mounted in there that has started to, it was overheat and is now catching on fire. And he hops off the bike because there's a cloud of, he's engulfed in smoke now. And everybody steps back like, oh, damn. And I step back for a second as the thing's heating up. And then I go, wait a minute, I just did a whole study for the government on lithium ion battery safety. I'm like, I know what to do with this thing. So it amounted to mostly me poking it with a stick to try to get the battery out of there. And so the battery is slowly but surely internally melting down. The plastic casing's melting off, and one by one, the little cells in there would like fizz off like a firework. And finally, I poked it out of the middle of the frame without it igniting the gasoline, which is on the bike, or burning the rest of the bike down. We poked all the pieces out of there, and then it was another mechanic race. We had to try to figure out how to fix this bike and get it back on the track by the end of the race. So we walked around the pit, flat track family, bummed a lead acid battery, which was 3 times the size of the battery that was in there, used a couple of hose clamps. I think it was Shane Fox again. He might have been there. Used a couple of hose clamps, a whole bunch of duct tape, and some zip ties, bunged that thing underneath the engine, figured out that the problem was the regulator rectifier had been overcharging the battery. So I pulled one phase of the stator out so it wouldn't overcharge you. And then I said, Mike, be careful out there because this bike might not make it the whole session. It might die on you when you're on the track. And I patted him on the back and I was like, good luck, buddy. And you went out there and ran some pretty hot laps. It wasn't too bad considering that the bike had been on fire about 20 minutes before. And he has photos of me in a cloud of smoke,
great.
Poking the thing with a stick.
With a smile.
And the aftermath burnt up battery.
Everybody else was just standing back, terrified of the whole thing. I had gone into, 4-year-old tantrum mode, was throwing helmets and it was like, the only thing I can really remember is when I got off the bike and realized the bike was on fire, I just kind of tossed it to Tim, one of our, mechanics.
You did, yeah.
And I was just like, let it burn. I'm like, don't get hurt, just let it burn. And I walked away, assuming he would drop it and it would burn to the ground. When it was done burning, pieces up and put it in the van and go home. And next thing I know, these guys have the bike running and they're like, what are you doing, dude? Get your helmet on. You got to go. I'm like, oh, shit. Earplugs, helmet, and well,
I really appreciated that experience too, because so I have not actually been a pro mechanic before, but Mike definitely puts on the air of a pro racer. So he was super pissed off and very stressed by this whole situation. And I was like, oh, this is the real deal. Like, we're doing this for real. We got a real rider here who's going to be a jerk. If this had been MotoGP, you'd have been on TV trash talking us after the race for screwing up your bike. So it was pretty sweet to me because I got to have a real taste of what it's like. But it's always fun to mechanic that bike, Mike, and I'll gladly go do it again because it's the most exciting time I'll have being a pit buddy ever.
Yeah, that bike has just been a drama queen from day one. I got to tell you.
Yeah, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. Well, again, when we talked back though, realistically, I think we did pretty well for the amount of effort we put into it. What ended up happening in the end is that they got rid of the GNC2 class, right? And so now to run a mile on a big bike, you got to run with the top level pros, and we think we're pretty good, but that's a whole nother level of commitment and development that we're not going to have time as hobbyists to pull out.
I purposely avoided kind of commenting on AFT and their ideas of what is a good idea and a bad idea. I'll just dabble in it a little bit, but I will say that one of the things that they that they did, which I thought was great, which let me start my second pro career, 5 years ago, in my 40s, was they decided to get rid of kind of the XR 750, which was a race built engine, and go to production based, 650s, and let them go to 700. So we initially built a 650 and then a 700. And then while we were getting ready to go to Daytona with the 700, they decided we're going to make it 750. So then we had to scrap that engine to the tune of $10,000 and buy a $4,000 crankshaft, just the crankshaft. And then you need new rods and new pistons and, just the whole thing. And, because they let a purpose-built race engine in, which many of our viewers will know is the Indian. So for years, they said, we're going to go to a production-based program for the 750s. And many people like me, privateers, spent their money building one. And then they said, yeah, but we'll go ahead and let this racer in too. And that ended up killing the class. So
I mean, rules changes are always a challenge, and especially again for hobbyists, right? Because we're not going to recoup any of this investment either in winnings or in promotions, or I mean, look, our resumes are what they are. They're not going to grow, and we're not going to be able to go out and get sponsorships with them. So, again, we're doing it for fun, and getting into the mile was really, or doing the mile races was really cool, and it would have been cool if we could have gone all the way, but it was too much of a commitment to continue. And I don't fault you at all for doing that. And again, going back to the vintage bike, that's the beauty of the vintage bike. The tech doesn't change. Like 1973 happened, and there's only so much. There's not anything that they're really going to change on that. So that's another reason that I like to race the vintage stuff, is because I have several years to develop it, and the tech isn't moving on without me. I can just kind of work on it little bits and pieces as I have time.
Craig, tell us a little bit about your racing. What you're doing, what classes you're running, and how you and your bike are going.
Sure. So again, I was racing 100s when I lived down near you, and that was a really good experience. And absolutely, as Mike recommends on his channel, I think every club should have a 100 class, and everybody who's just starting out, if you can, it's a great way to start because it was extremely cheap. And really, the effort to fun level was really high, or was really good. Like, you get a stock 100, or maybe you modify it a little bit, and all you've got to do is change the oil, put gas in it, and go to the races and learn what you're going to learn. The issue with that, though, is that a 100's still not like managing the traction on a big bike. So, you've talked on your channel about how you have to do throttle control, and that's because the engine has more drive than the dirt track will take, and it'll spin up. And so at some point you get far enough along with a 100, you're not really going to be able to get further because you don't have the power control that you need to have. And so I wanted to step up a class. And again, I loved this motorcycle. It had, for no other reasons than just it was beautiful and seemed really cool to me, and of all of my background. But also the 250 or the vintage class are attainable for my level of experience, right? So I bought this bike because I love it, but also strategically knowing I'd go into the vintage class. So right now I usually race vintage and then 250. So in the vintage class, it's me and a bunch of other old guys going out there and having fun. Difficulty with the vintage class is a lot of times depending on the group, there'll either be not that good of attendance, or there'll be a wide spread in the performance of the bikes. In the 250 class, I'm racing against the teenagers, which is got its own challenge because they're maybe a little more aggressive or hairy than I would like, but I'm able to usually hang with them on this bike because it is a purpose-built flat tracker. I can be competitive in that class as well. And so, again, I'm just out there to have fun. So when I was 22, started racing motorcycles, I was win or crash. Now I'm don't crash, win, maybe if I can. So,
Craig,
that's how I ride.
the way I met you, I don't know, we've known each other 15 years now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah,
It's-
man.
So,
20, yeah, 2010, about probably 2009. No, it was like '09, I think,
okay.
because it was right after the financial crash, and that's why your girlfriend was out on work at the time.
Yeah. So let's talk about what my channel. I don't know that I'm just a flat track racer. Loves to talk about flat track racing and loves to be the center of attention. So I had to make a flat track YouTube channel.
Self-aware, self-aware. I like that.
Yeah. Basically, I like to hear myself talk, but I also can help people a little bit, and that's kind of how we met. I was teaching at a school, and I met you,
Yeah.
and you really, to me, despite being a uber nerd, mega intelligent, motivated, focused type of engineer guy, you came, to me anyway, to learn flat track. Kind of, you were a grown ass man, with the wife, and
Yeah.
a plan, and not the prototypical 17-year-old getting into racing. But there's a lot of you
Right.
guys, and you're the meat and potatoes of what we need to keep our sport going. So those people come to my channel and they want to know, how do I start doing this? But they're asking me, who's been doing it since I've been doing me, and I'm not the best person. Tell them, help me help them get into the sport. How do you start from ground zero?
Well, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I'll give you a couple of things. So, I've already given you credit, is that I do think that Mike's advice on getting started in terms of starting out on smaller and less expensive bikes is absolutely spot on. And, if you can just sort of do follow his advice on your first race and all of that, I think he's covered it pretty well already on the channel. What I would say is, step one is, if you can, there's a couple of those schools out there that you can go and get familiarized with the dirt. Those are, if you have the means, and hopefully if you're in your, you're not in your teens anymore, you can spare a couple $100 to go out and take a school, because it is a great experience in that there's limited commitment in you showing up with specialized gear. They'll have a bike ready for you, and then you can get some instruction and get some practice. At the end of the day, your actual riding ability is only going to increase by so much, because it's a steep learning curve for you, but you're going to be able to get a feel for if this is for you, right? So you get a feel before you make any huge expenditures. The ones that are near me are American Super Camp. I know you have Corner Spin near you. There's quite a few other dirt track schools, some out west. I highly recommend just start there. Go to one of those schools, get on the dirt, see if you like it. You probably will. Okay, so assuming you've already covered that hurdle, then the next step is to go figure out where your local racetrack is. And this is actually one of my main criticisms of flat track, right? So compared to road racing and other sports, we do a terrible job of publicizing our clubs and races and making sure everybody knows where to go and what to do. Facebook has helped a lot, because a lot of Facebook pages are out there now, but it's still kind of hard to get into the scene. But the first step is to get into the scene and find your local track, and just go out there and watch and meet the people and get a feel for the locale and what's going on and what the race routine is. And most of all, think about what class would be appropriate for you based on what you see on the track. So find the people that you jive with, find the skill level that makes you not too uncomfortable, and then go out there and, try to figure out how you can acquire a bike. And then we get into the bike thing. Wow. Now that's a super subjective topic, but
yeah, and this just chaps my ass, Pavlich, is guys come in with their shit pile bike, and then they decide what class it could win in, and then they try to shoehorn it in, rather than what I think they should do. And this is crazy, bear with me. I think they should read the rule book and either just accept their bike goes in that class, or buy a bike that fits in the class they want to race in.
Well, and that's why I suggested you go out there first and kind of decide on a target class to start out. And again, you're really going to want to think about all the things that we talked about earlier, which is, what's my commitment level? And my commitment level is going to be my commitment to dicking around with my motorcycle and my commitment to how fast I'm going to need to go to be competitive in this class, right? Because you can enter a vintage class, which has a pretty low commitment in competitiveness, but a pretty high commitment in equipment maintenance. You can go, then there's intermediate classes. So 250 class, that's a little tough because you're going to have a lot of younger kids out there, but then there are also age-based classes.
Over
Some
30,
places will
over
have beginner
40,
classes.
over 50.
Right. And so you're really going to want to try to target where you think that you would fit in and buy a bike specifically for that class. To your point, I mean, it's much better if you're just starting out and you don't already own a bike to get some practice on a borrowed bike, then go to the track and find out what is going to fit best at that club for you. And I mean, and that's a very individual decision. So you have to kind of take that lightly. You have to kind of figure it out for yourself.
All right, don't agree with me just to be polite. I know that you wouldn't normally, but since we're filming a video,
That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Not a problem for us, Mike.
Okay, sweet. What I have suggested in some videos that often gets lost is if you're thinking about getting into the sport, go to a race and just start talking to people,
Yep.
and look at the guys that are running up front in the pro classes and just go talk to them. They'll probably talk to you. I mean, get a sense of, if they're getting ready for a race, putting their helmet on, don't talk to them then, but they will tell you who to talk to and what to do, and then say, hey, I love racing. Can I help? And they'll give you a rag and you'll clean a wheel. And there is something about grabbing a rag and cleaning a wheel. If you will show the slightest amount of interest in the sport and involve yourself in helping somebody, they will just suck you into the family and teach you all kinds of stuff. And then you can really understand, hey, do I fit in this class? Do I fit in that class? How committed am I? What equipment do I want to do? And all that sort of stuff. I mean, being involved.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be one of the faster guys. I mean, just go out there and don't be shy, introduce yourself and ask questions. So I can speak for myself and a couple people at my local club. So I know one guy at my local club, somebody showed up, expressed an interest in flat track racing, and he was even lending out his spare bike for this guy to ride for a while. And in the upcoming Flat Out Friday, in March 4th, I'll be running this bike, but I've got a dirt bike that I'm lending to a friend. It's a Supermoto, and he's going to come race. So he's got a factory ride, and it's just about, that's the level of friendliness that you could find, that if you have the right attitude and you're offering to help, and we're here to make friends. So, and we love to grow the sport. So, there's always some side way to get in there and get experience. If it's, I've gotten pit buddies a lot of time. I love getting a pit buddy. I know you do, Mike. So offer to be somebody's pit buddy, and then you can become their understudy. Or even if you're not interested in helping out or whatever, find a friend at the track, because nothing is more motivating to keep you going and keep the sport going and making sure that it's fun every time than having a buddy to be like, come on, dude, we're going racing. Yeah, I know it looks like it's going to rain and your bike's got a flat tire and you're tired from this week of work, but like, get that tire fixed. We're going out there, rain or shine. Let's go riding, and because if you do go riding, you'll be happy. Every once in a while you get rained out and you'll be like, damn it, Mike, why'd you make me go to the track? It was going to rain. I told you. But most of the time, if you do ride, you'll come home and it was worth it. Especially at the hobby level, there's a lot of weekends where it doesn't seem like it's going to be worth it. Packing up the car, the truck, loading up the bike, getting all the gear out. After a long week of work, it's really tough. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's going to work out. And once you get out there, it is worth it. I promise. Even if you have, most of the time, even a bad weekend is better than another, whatever, watching TV and doing nothing weekend.
Yeah.
So.
When you and I met, you and your other engineer, I guess he's my buddy now too, Darian, came to the school. And didn't one of you or both of you decide afterwards that you could make a steel shoe?
Oh, well, yeah, I definitely did that. Yeah. That's a huge mistake. Let me warn anybody who's thinking about building a steel shoe as a hobbyist. Take my advice. Don't. Just buy one.
Did anybody that you know tell you that not to do
You know, well, I mean, part of the reason why I'm such a good mechanic and engineer is because when people tell me not to do something or that it'd be too hard, I don't listen. But that said, you were correct on that one. You were correct on that one. Yes. I still have the Delrin shoe that I made, and it worked really well.
No,
But
it didn't. No, it didn't.
in the end, I would have ended up spending so much replacing plastic pucks on it that it would have cost more after about 3 or 4 outings than a real steel shoe made by a pro. So I quickly did the math and was like, if I run this thing 4 weekends, I could have bought a steel shoe from somebody who makes them. And I do have one, and it has lasted my entire career. I have not even had to have it refaced yet.
This is something that I'm a little bit torn about, and I wanted to touch base with you on it. I've had a guy, he found my channel. He's got a little tiny channel, Tiny Motor Garage, where he's got a little garage down in Mexico. He's got couple of bikes, and he talks about fixing them. And I mean, it's a great little channel. I appreciate it. And he's like, hey, how do you start doing this? And I'm trying to put together a series to help people do that. And I want to talk to you about that. That is one of the big things that I don't know what to do. There's a safety thing with the steel shoe, is that it can keep your foot from grabbing the ground and injuring yourself, but it's a huge barrier to entry, because it's going to cost you, I don't know, what are they running, $200 now to make one?
Yeah, it was $300 or $400 all in, because you got to buy a boot. Even if you buy it used, you got to have it custom fit to the boot, right? So
yeah, well, you should. Many people try to just buy a random boot, and what do you
more or less, yeah.
Could you speak to that as coming into the sport, having done it what I would consider the wrong way, and then the right way later?
Well, interestingly, I have a lot of experience in that. And so, of course, like we talked about earlier. So again, this comes back to the commitment level. And unfortunately, motorsports is expensive. Now, I want to be really clear here, because flat track's one of the cheapest motorsports that you can get into, but motorsports does involve a certain monetary commitment. And so when I was younger, before I finished my engineering degree and I was racing my RD 350, finances were a big issue. And in a lot of cases, it's just going to take some of the fun out of it if you're overcommitted financially to doing the sport. And you'll also take on a lot of risks, because you won't buy the right equipment, and you'll go out there and you'll push your luck. And this is in a lot of ways, mechanically, safety wise, and all of those things, to make it happen. And so I guess I would warn people against pushing their luck, and especially to an extent when it comes to the safety gear. That's one that you see a lot of times. And you don't need to be like Mike and invest in the primo carbon fiber factory ultimate gear, because his stuff is not only the best that money can buy, but new every year, because it has to be sparkling and clean in order to get, you got to get the style points. I mean, when you're Mike Dillon, style points are critical. And so you don't need to go to that level, but you do want to make sure that you're not compromising your personal safety. And I guess what I'll say for all of those people who are starting out in my range, where you're past 25 and you're not probably going to be a pro, no offense, for a living, if you're injured, you can't ride. And if you can't ride, you can't get better. So you really want to try to ride within your comfort zone and make sure that you're doing it in a safe way, because otherwise you're just kind of being a little silly about it, right? It's supposed to be fun, and nothing will take the fun out of it quicker than getting a dislocated shoulder or having a broken ankle and then having to go back to work busted up. Now, there is some risk in the sport. We can't control all of it, but what you can control, I definitely recommend you do. And another thing that I do, and again, this is maturity, is like we talked about, I used to go and win or crash. And I very quickly learned that that's just going to result in a crash. And so now I'm more patient with my learning curve, which is not riding over my head to try to progress, but to just ride to the limit that I know that I'm capable of, and figure it out rather than trying to ride over the limit and see if any inspiration comes from that. Sometimes you still accidentally step over the limit, but if you're riding over the limit and you crash, that was your fault. If you're surprised that you crash, sometimes that's just going to happen.
Is there a suggestion that you can give to the beginner where, you know, where to ride, how to find a place to ride? You know, you moved to a new location, you know, you were down here in the South where there's tracks all over the place. Then you moved to the Chicago area. That might be a great example for some viewers coming to the channel trying to figure out how and where to race. How in 2022 do you find a place to ride?
Okay, well, I mean, the quickest way to do it now, there's a lot of different specific groups on the Facebook, and then just trawling. YouTube is great. They'll find your way through the clubs. And so Facebook, YouTube, and then just general internet searches. Certainly, if you have a district club, at least in my area, is District 17 is Chicago, and District 16 is Wisconsin nearby. And so you can go to the AMA district websites, and they'll have all of their events listed. And then you can dig into the clubs that host those events in a little more detail. Usually they'll have a website or a Facebook page, and you can learn from there. That said, and I will admit, the biggest criticism I have, I guess another big criticism I have of flat track is track time is extremely hard to get in flat track. So a flat track event is a really short amount of track time to try to figure out what you're doing, and finding places that have open practices with any kind of regularity is pretty challenging, because typically for a club, they've got to groom the track in order for you to be able to get effective flat track practice on it. And if they're not doing a race, or, you know, there's not going to be any money involved, they're going to be reluctant to get a guy out there with the water truck and the smoothing truck to get everything worked out for you. So that is a big challenge. One of the clubs that I race at here is up north in Wisconsin, Aztalan, will run practices for club members, but it's a little too far away for me to make it regular. So it's pretty challenging.
That's a great topic, and it would be fun for you to kick me in the balls here, which I think is probably going to be the enjoyable feature of talking to you. Let me explain to the viewers that I oftentimes do not ride practice at a flat track race. Well,
That's nuts.
I will unload. I'll go look at the track and look at the, you know, the temperature and see when the sun's going to set and decide. And I may only ride, of the 4 practices that I could ride, the very last one. And I often complain that we start the race event too early. We should do it later in the night and cut down practice. And that is completely disconnected from the reality of what Craig just talked about. Explain.
Yeah, I would kick you in the balls if you said that. Yes.
Yeah. Explain why.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to be really clear. So typical flat track.
You explain why that's good for me and why that's stupid for everybody else.
Sure. Well, I mean, okay. So Mike has, over all the years of doing this across, I can't even count how many states you've raced on different surfaces and different tracks, has developed a level of understanding of what his body's capable of, what that wood-rotax is capable of, because he's been riding that thing for almost all of those years, and then what a track, from looking at it or getting a few laps in it, what adjustments he's going to have to make to either his style or his bike to try to get basically what his optimal performance is. I have none of those skills. Okay, so I've been riding 250 for, I'll say, 2.5 seasons. I have mostly only done it at a handful of tracks, and I still have no idea what I'm going to do when I hit the track every single time. The first lap is like, oh, I kind of remember how to do this. So the practice is really critical. And even at that, if you're going out to do a day of riding, most tracks, even when we lived in North Carolina, were an hour and a half plus 2 hours away from where you live. And you're going to drive all that way and load up all of your stuff. And a flat track race is about 2.5 to 3 minutes long from start to finish. So you're going to go 2-hour drive to ride for 3 minutes. Now, certain races, it feels like an eternity when you're getting into that third minute, but but it's a really short amount of time. And so if you go out there and you race 2 classes, that usually gives you 2 practices, 2 heats, and 2 races, which is 6 sessions of 2 minutes each. So between 12 and 18 minutes of total on track time. And that is, if you're under the pressure of competition as well, that's not a lot of time to experiment. So you're not able to get a lot of laps in. And so again, that's another reason why I recommend starting with a school, because you'll be able to get a full couple days of riding in to set you at a good baseline. And if your club does offer practices, a lot of times they offer practices the day after the race, or sometimes they'll have special test and tune days. Definitely take advantage of those if you're just starting out. One of the things that I love to do around here is actually set up some practice sessions. So I haven't gotten motivated enough to do it, but I might call some of the local car tracks and stuff and see if they'd be willing to let us pay for a day. You had done that before for us when we were just starting out. Mike had rented out a track, you and a couple other guys, and we would all chip in and go do a practice session. And those are extremely valuable. So if you can get a couple of those in, do it. Just remember, the club's got expenses to prepping the track. So if you can help defray that, it's very helpful.
Yeah, that's one of the things that chaps my ass about flat track racing, and our peers that do this is, like you said, I would challenge someone to explain to me what form of racing is cheaper than flat track motorcycle racing. So, when we say, hey, I'm going to need 20, 30, $70 to run this day where you can do 300 laps, or really, when you put a steel shoe on for the first time, you cannot lift your foot after several minutes.
Yeah.
So let's come off the hip here and realize how much fun you're having, and help defray those costs so you can do this.
Well, that's where old guys like me come in. So luckily, having gotten down the road a little bit, I'm the guy putting money into the sport. Nobody's sponsoring me. I pay for all my stuff. But that said, on this bike, I can make it almost a whole season on one set of tires. Admittedly, that's at my very low speed, but so a set of tires on a lightweight bike can go for a whole season on dirt within reason. And the track fees compared to road racing are just unbelievably cheap. So a whole night of racing is, like you said, $70. A day on a road race course is $300. Because they've got to insure the track. The track costs a heck of a lot more to rent. You do get a little bit more time.
Every corner. Luckily, we really ostensibly have 2 corners. A road race track can have 23.
Right. I mean, so, and then every piece of that equation is more expensive. Typically, the bikes are more expensive. The tires are more expensive. Your equipment is more expensive, every aspect of it. So, and then let's not even talk about cars, because we're talking about twice as many tires and a level of snobbery that will disgust you, frankly. You may leave a car racing track thinking about income inequality instead of your race.
Yeah.
So
no kidding.
You will not have that problem in flat track.
Hang on a second. You've made it to the end of a Flat Track Factory video. Do the channel a favor and click the like button and the subscribe button so you'll be notified when our next video comes out. Some people have asked how to support the channel financially, and there's a link to do that down in the description. Thanks for watching.